It is an error to have the presupposition of the existence of a divine spark coming about because of the flesh. This is what anti-natalists do not understand. In this Gnostic community of ours, they agree that this is a reincarnation soul trap. But then again, they say, I will not bring children into the world because I do not want to trap the spirit within flesh. I don't want to be, quote unquote, responsible for that. But what they don't understand is it is not the body that brought about the spirit. It is a spirit that doesn't bring about the body, but it gets put into a body, whether it likes it or not, while it's in samsara, while it is suffering in the world of dukkha, as the Buddhists call it, which basically translates to suffering or dissatisfaction. When it comes to the samsaric nature of dukkha, they taught the medicine for the soul to get rid of this sickness is to reach, first and foremost, nirvana, which is the cessation of desire, which is the cessation of suffering, therefore, and that's just the first step. And the second step is to reach moksha, which is liberation from reincarnation. So it's as if nirvana, if you're able to remain in that state, you will eventually reach the state of moksha. Because when you have nothing to do with the desires and the attachments of this world, and you see it for the reincarnation soul trap that it is, you're able to escape thereby. But to say that you escape by not bringing a soul into the world to begin with, by not procreating, is missing the point. It is a contradiction in terms to believe in the existence of a reincarnation soul trap, and then to think that you're doing spirit a favor by not procreating. Because let me put it to you this way. Let's just take a male, for instance. Let's say there's a woman, and she wants to have offspring, and let's say I refuse to have an emission inside of her, and I do the pull-out method, and let's say that's successful, and I say I'm not going to have a child with you, and then her hormones and her female nature that makes her want to have a children as her biological duty more than anything else says, okay, well, you know what? I'm going to go find a man who wants to get married and have a family, right? So she is going to leave me and find somebody who will procreate with her. Now, you have to keep in mind that me as a man, I did not stop sentience from coming in the world, nor the potential spirit that would have incarnated in that particular womb, because the womb in question, which is the woman who left me for a man who would be willing to procreate with her, still procreated regardless. See, that's the thing. You talk to a lot of anti-natalist men in particular, and they say that they've done the right thing by not bringing life into the world. But it wasn't their call to begin with, because the womb that they didn't procreate with, well, that womb just found another man who did procreate. So nothing was really solved as far as that issue is concerned. And so it sounds controversial, but there's nothing quite as worthless as a male anti-natalist. Because let's say over half of anti-natalists are males. Well, they're not able to bring life into the world to begin with, because they're not birthing. Okay, they're non-birthing persons. And they didn't do spirit a favor by not procreating, because the woman who left them to procreate with another, the vicious cycle continues. And even if you had procreated, the spirit that would have incarnated in that particular body, whereby you are the father, would just have you as the father in that particular scenario. But had you not procreated, that same spirit would have been in that particular womb, just with a different father. So the males are not really doing much. And let's say you have the female antinatalist, and the female antinatalist, let's say it's over 50% of them, they're like, okay, well, since I'm the ultimate say as to the body that I'm not going to bring into the world, I am thereby doing spirit a favor. But what they don't realize is if the spirit, okay, all that means is the spirit is not going to incarnate in your particular fetal option in the pregnant stomach from your particular egg that has been fertilized. The same spirit that's forced to reincarnate within this reincarnation soul trap is just going to go into a nearby womb somewhere in this world of billions of people, where right now as we speak there are millions of pregnant stomachs internationally, and there is always going to be a womb that is growing a fetus on the inside that the spirit is going to incarnate into, whether they like it or not. So this idea of anti-natalism being the solution to not bring divine sparks into this world is a contradiction in terms, because it's based upon the presupposition that the divine spark is trapped on account of creating bodies, when that is to presuppose that the divine spark came about because of the creation of the body. That is basically to say that the spirit is a byproduct of the sex act and flesh thereby created, when really what it is the spirit has nothing to do with a body, but it is forced to reincarnate in a body, right? That's what's happening. So, with that being said, antinatalism doesn't really make that much sense to me, because people are always going to procreate, and there's always going to be a available pregnant stomach for the spirit to go into somewhere in the world. So every antinatalist woman who's not procreating is not doing spirit a favor, because it doesn't have to go into your womb, it's just going to be forced to go inside of another womb. So what I think the real solution is for the individual spirit who reincarnates, which it will inevitably do, regardless of you in particular not creating bodies, it's going to find a body for itself by the body that's being grown inside of a stomach. And the only real solution, I think, if there is one at all, is for the spirit to dedicate its life to gnosis and reach the state of nirvana, which is the cessation of desires and attachments, and therefore the cessation of suffering as far as at least craving is concerned, and then eventually reach the state of moksha, which is, so we're told in the Eastern religions, liberation from the reincarnation cycle, and then we can return to the pleroma from whence we came. But every individual spirit, if it wants to get liberation as an individual divine spark, has to reach this moksha on its own while it is alive in the flesh. But by me thinking that I'm doing spirit a favor by not impregnating a womb is completely delusional. Because even though I'm not impregnating the womb is going to get impregnated with or without my cock. Okay? And same if I happen to have a woman who didn't procreate. We think, oh, look at us. Let's say we're happily married, and she got her tubes tied. So us producing offspring is impossible. And we think, wow, think of the divine sentience of the divine spark that we did not entrap within this prison because we are childless. Well, that individual or multiple spirits that would have incarnated within our offspring is just going to incarnate in a nearby womb that is, and there's probably dozens of them within a 1 mile radius alone, not to mention the millions that are on the face of this earth right now. So I don't like the idea that spirit is being done a favor by not reproducing, because that is, again, the presupposition that it is the flesh that begets the spirit, and there would be no spirit or divine spark without the creation of the flesh, which is ultimately, from a Gnostic perspective, blasphemy. But it would also be a mistake to say the opposite and say that, okay, we can agree that the flesh didn't bring about the spirit, but maybe the spirit brought about the flesh. And I also feel that even though that's most people's alternative, that's also false. I believe that there was some sort of a predatory mind that is demiurgic in nature that brought about the bodies as a prison to then put the spirit that came from the pleroma or came from the divine aeon of the Father, as it's said in Gnosticism, and then by creating this abomination of samsara and creating the prison of the flesh, it then took something much more ancient, which is the spirit, that predated this particular corporeal creation, and then put them in the bodies by force. That's what I believe, because I am a Gnostic. So the point is, because the spirit is going to incarnate, whether it likes it or not, because certainly anti-natalism did not stop us from being born. And let's say our particular parents were anti-natalist, then we would just have different parents, because somebody's getting knocked up somewhere. So the point is, the individual spirit has to do everything in its power in this life to see the prison matrix system for what it is, not fall victim to the mind control, have complete and utter detachment, and live a life of discipline, dedicating itself to gnosis and reaching nirvana, and therefore reaching liberation. So thereby there's no attachments that's going to keep us stuck in the wheel of samsara, and then we can return from whence we came. That's what the Buddha says, that's what Gnostics believe, and I'm not even saying that me personally, I believe this full-heartedly, but it resonates with me the most. That's what I'll say. So in this life, that is what I am going to work on. For example, right now, I am reading the Nag Hammadi scriptures, and it's a lofty task, but I could tell you that the truth is resonating with me on an extreme level, because it's actually cured my depression. Sometimes I have religious experiences that are so intense that my ears actually start ringing, and I feel this happiness because it's the truth of Gnostic thought. That is where I find my happiness. I find my happiness in gnosis, and now that I'm dedicating most of my time to studying the truth of the gnosis, I am doing my part to better enlighten my spirit so I can continue to evolve as a being and hopefully reach the state of moksha. So when it came to what I said in my previous videos, when it came to nihilism of, will to truth and will to meaning is basically stupidity, I will say publicly that I retract that. I think will to truth and the will to meaning is codependent on whether or not you have the discernment to find the truth and have that be your only will to meaning. So to me, my will to meaning is the will to truth, which is the gnosis that is found in the religious scriptures of a so-called heretical nature. Because there's a reason why these scriptures their libraries were burned and they were all tortured and basically genocided. But then, regardless, the gnosis would resurface by archaeological discovery over and over and over. And no matter how hard the demiurge and its Yahwehic monotheistic system tried to make these scriptures be wiped off the face of the earth, they thought they were successful. But what they don't know is when it comes to the divine providence, which is the gnosis itself, this spirit has a divine will of its own. It has a thelema of its own. And that's why, no matter how hard they try, you can't kill the gnosis. The gnosis is going to come back, and it's going to be discovered by archaeological findings or otherwise, because no matter how hard the demiurge tries, it's not going to kill the gnosis. And from now on, I would say that my will to truth, my will to meaning is the will to truth, which is the gnosis, which is why I'm reading the Nag Hammadi scriptures. And I find that it's, as of right now, at least put my depression in remission, and I feel happiness now that I have found that my purpose, because I used to think that my life was without purpose, but now I realize that my purpose is not to sit around and be depressed and want to unalive myself saying, there is no truth, everything is without meaning. No. I have discovered that my meaning is to pursue truth. And that is the only meaning. And not only to seek it, but to speak it. And most importantly, to live it. And that's what I'm doing. And I'm striving to reach liberation from the reincarnation soul trap as an individual. That's my purpose. And I do so by pursuing gnosis alone, preaching it aloud, and most importantly, living it. That's my will to meaning. That's my will to truth. That's my newfound purpose in life.